Welcome everybody to the webinar today on maximizing ROI with Cambium Networks, innovative and cost-effective latest generation of PMP and ePMP products. First of all, thanks for being here, y'all. Also want to give a big thanks to Bruce Collins and Matt Mangriotis at Cambium Networks. How's it going, guys?
Great, Jeff.
Very good. Thanks for having us, Matt. Jeff.
Good. So as I said in this in the heading of this presentation, we're going to get into both PMP and ePMP products. So without delaying anymore, Matt, I'm going to kick this over to you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Great to talk to everyone today. Matt Mangriotis here. I'm a product manager with the PMP portfolio at Cambium Networks, and we're here today to talk, as Jeff said, about the next generation, the newest generation of PMP products that we got coming down the pike. Before we get to the products themselves, though, we always talk about here at Cambium the one network. All of your stuff, whether it's PTP, Wi-Fi, switching equipment, or PMP, it's really beneficial to have that one pane of glass, the one network that you guys manage, monitor. You know, all the tools are similar, the management interfaces are similar, and this really helps you streamline the effort, cost, and time it takes to manage that network. So being simple, cloud-based, and having that performance all in one pane of glass is really the key to managing that one network. So CN Maestro X, as normally we say, ties everything together and allows you to do that. But today we're going to focus here on the PMP section and talk about what's coming. So in general, for a network operator, there's a lot of needs around that network, and lately it's been about providing more bandwidth, right? We always want to provide what the customer requires in terms of bandwidth. Higher packages, you need to keep providing more and more speed in order to keep competitive with alternatives that are out there. So we're going to talk about how we do that. Reducing churn of existing customers. So your customer's been out there for a while, and if you have a solid surface, regardless of what speed it's at, if it's solid and it's as expected, things are great, and customers don't look to move. When we create customer delight by providing that consistently advertised speed and quality of experience. So there are ways to get a better experience without having to increase bandwidth. If it's a consistent experience, that really goes a long way to reducing churn. We also provide tools and capability to reduce the rate of install failure. Proper planning really goes a long way to minimizing your cost. If we can do that, we can market to the right folks that are, potential customers, folks you're going to be able to install. That really helps, again, reducing that overall cost of doing business. And then 6 gigahertz, really the focus of today's discussion is how gives you that potential to reach more customers. There's a ton of spectrum becoming available, and we'll get into some details around that. And then really, you don't want to buy equipment and then have to replace it all with the next generation. We make migration easy, and that's something we've believed in for a long, long time. Make your investments work for you. So how do we do that? Really, it's about adding customers, getting more range, reducing churn, staying competitive, and then increasing bandwidth. We call it the 30-30-30 program. For 450, if you have some 450 out there, we have 3 steps or 3 different areas that we're focusing on to improve things simply by software updates. The first 30 is the sector capacity improvements, and that's already released. As of the July timeframe, we now have software release 22.1. And that, combined with the previous feature listed here, the multiple groups per frame, gives you more than a 30% improvement in total sector capacity. And we're doing that with these couple of features here. And it really can be seen in the busy hour using CN Medusa, or the 450M product. We added another downlink slot in every single frame, which adds another about 10% of capacity. The next 30, we're going to have some larger antennas that can be connected to the 450B connectorized version to increase the range. There's that loophole, if you will, in the 5.8 band where you can add enhanced EIRP on the subscriber end because it is classified as a point-to-point, if you will. So you can get really high power, really high EIRP with the subscriber side of the 5.8 band. And these larger dishes can enhance that range. So for those really hard to reach guys, you can reach them now. A 3-foot parabolic dish will give you about 32 to 33 dBi gain, which is really about 50% range enhancement over what we can offer today. So that's under FCC testing, and once we get approved for that, they'll be released hopefully towards the end of the year here. And then the third 30, that's subscriber throughput. We're committed to getting this re-architecture of the MAC layer done early next year, and that'll improve subscriber capacity on an individual basis. Right now, we just can't fill the pipe when you use wider channels because this architecture was originally created for Canopy way back when. We're just now exceeding the ability for the packets to queue up in line, if you will. And so what we're doing is re-architecting that MAC layer to have better efficiency and provide more throughput to each subscriber in the network. So that's coming in as the third 30, and that's going to be probably the most important and the most visible one, where you'll see huge improvements in certain situations to individual subscribers. So just to sum up everything, the first 30, the sector capacity using 450M, is out there and released already. The second 30 is an enhanced range when using some larger antennas that can be paired with the 450B connectorized. And the third 30 is re-architecting that MAC layer to allow the ability to fill that pipe and increase subscriber capacity, individual subscriber capacity. So all those things will enhance what you already own. That's the key. You're more effectively providing plans up to and exceeding 100 megabit packages. We've proven that we can do this given these improvements in the software. So what's after this? What are we doing beyond that? Well, we talk about 5 gigahertz. We added the ability in both ePMP and 450 to do 5850 to 5895, an extra 45 megahertz, using the STA, Special Temporary Authority, which we hope will some point become standard. Part of the 5.8 band, but for right now, it's still under STA. They opened that up during COVID to allow some more frequency use. But what's next? They're opening up 6 gigahertz, which is a huge amount of spectrum. And then we'll be able to take advantage of that in both Uni 5 and Uni 7 for standard power outdoor, which is the same power levels roughly as the 5 gigahertz band, 36 dBm or 4 watts. But it does require the use of what they call an AFC, or an automated frequency coordination system. We are going to launch both ePMP, which has 2 SKUs, ePMP 4500 and ePMP 4600. 4600 will cover the 6 gigahertz band. 4500 covers the 5 gigahertz band. And then we will also have the PMP 450V, which has 1 SKU that covers both 5 and 6 gigahertz. So we're going to have products that cover the entire band in the next generation of product. 4500 and 4600 is already here, and Bruce will talk about that coming up. And I failed to mention at the beginning about if there are any questions, feel free to type them in the question box. We can see them and we'll get to them as needed if you have any questions about anything. And we'll, of course, be around at the end to answer additional questions as they come up. So knowing that, I'll spend a few minutes talking about the 450V. This is really the next generation of 450 product. The key here is that it's 5 and 6 gigahertz in 1 SKU. And because it's also backward compatible, this allows you to kind of build on what you have, maintain connection to existing 5 gigahertz radios, and then add 6 gigahertz as needed. And what we're launching in December is the 4x4 access point, which is this guy on the right. And as well, at the same time, we'll have a 4x4 subscriber module, which is this guy here. And so that will allow you to kind of utilize, it's a dual carrier system, and we can use it, run it in what we call dual sector mode, where you can utilize one carrier to perpetuate or continue to operate the legacy 5 gigahertz radios in that sector, and then start adding 6 gigahertz radios. Whether you aggregate those two channels or simply use the 6 gigahertz, you can do either or. If you're doing greenfield, of course, you can just operate both channels in 6 gigahertz and take advantage of some newly available spectrum. We will also later on have a 2x2 450V, which is a single channel version. But these radios will be capable of up to 100 megahertz channels. In the dual chain mode, meaning 4x4, you can do up to 2x100. So now we're talking about 1.5 gigabits of capacity, a huge amount of additional capacity versus what you're available with today in 450. And 450 today, you can only go up to 40 megahertz channels, and you can see with a single stream getting to about 250 or a little over 275 megabits in the 40 megahertz channel. Now we're talking 1.5 gigabits in a 2x100 megahertz scenario. So a huge amount of performance boost. And I'll talk about some of the other features available as well. So just to summarize for 450V, 5 and 6 gigahertz in the same hardware, both what we call backward and forward compatibility. So you can leverage your existing investment and then gracefully migrate towards that next generation of hardware. Ultra wideband support up to 100 megahertz channels, as mentioned. We will be doing right out of the gate dual sector mode, so you can operate those two carriers in the 4x4 independently. You can be both in 5, both in 6, or one in each. We'll have carrier aggregation for those radios that can support it, meaning the 4x4 radios. We have the ability in the hardware to do different bandwidths, transmit and receive diversity, meaning different frequencies in the transmit and receive, or different channel bandwidths in the downlink and the uplink. So that the platform itself is very flexible as well. Architecture is the same as 450, no difference here, very, very similar. In fact, it's a flat, simple architecture, just like you're used to with everything else that we have in PMP. And then after that, and this is about another year later, meaning end of 24, we're looking at the 450MV, which is the next generation of Medusa. That's going to have enhanced channels, 24 by 24. Again, backward compatibility, interference mitigation techniques. Because of all those chains, we can now mitigate interference in a better manner, improve near non-line of sight, and even produce N=1 frequency reuse. So this is coming again at the end of 24. So in terms of when you would want to replace or when you would want to do things, if you have a 450i sector or even the old original 450 AP, replacing with 450V makes a heck of a lot of sense. You can keep that 30 or 40 megahertz carrier in 5 gigahertz and then add a new 40 megahertz component carrier in 6 gigahertz, which will effectively double the sector capacity or more if you're using a smaller channel in 5. Then you can swap out your high runners or add 6 gigahertz as needed. And so you'll see lots and lots of additional capacity available by doing so. So this is kind of the no-brainer scenario. If you have a 450i or a 450 access point, swapping with V gains you a lot of capacity right away. For Medusa is a 14 by 14 radio today in 5 gigahertz. And so if you're enjoying multiplexing gain by having that multi-user MIMO capability in 450 Medusa, there are still scenarios where it makes sense to replace that with a 450V. If you're not getting more than 2x multiplexing gain during peak time, adding or replacing it with a 450V actually increases the sector capacity overall. And that's because the multiplexing gain really requires a few things to make it work really well, and that's spatial diversity of the subscribers across that sector and the reasonable spread of the data bandwidth among those different subscribers. So you can measure that by looking at your multiplexing gain, and we can help with that if you need help with that, but certainly it's something to consider. So even in some scenarios, having a 450 Medusa being replaced by 450V results in a much higher capacity for that sector. And I'm going to show you that kind of in a couple of different ways here. The first scenario is if I have a Medusa at 30 megahertz channel, and this is a theoretical scenario, but I have a peak throughput of about 250 because my multiplexing gain is about 1.5, and my sector capacity overall is 186 megabits in this scenario. Replacing that with a 450V enables me to use that 30 megahertz channel that I was using in 5 gig, and then adding 80 megahertz in the 6 gigahertz range. So I'm actually improving my overall capacity by almost more than I had to begin with. So I'm almost at 400 megs now with the total capacity. Now looking at a real world example, this is an actual customer deployment where they have one Medusa at 10-mile range, 40 SMs on the sector, multiplexing gain of 1.66. They're seeing sector capacity of 130. Now I replace with 450V. I add that 80 megahertz of 6 gigahertz spectrum. I get about 80 megs in the 30 megahertz 5 gigahertz spectrum. But now with the 80 megahertz channel in 6, I'm adding another 155. So you can see I'm almost doubling the total capacity by moving from 130 to 234. So it's a pretty effective use of the 6 gigahertz spectrum to effectively double my bandwidth, going from a Medusa to a 450V. So just to summarize, when would you want to do that? When do you want to overlay? If your multiplexing gain is higher than 2, then overlay. Just use the 6 gigahertz and provide those higher tier plans to those customers that need it. You can use that using this 80 megahertz and 6 gigahertz, and then you can kind of just replace the guys that need to be replaced with that higher tier service. So you can get 2x the throughput by aggregating those two. If you maintain that 40 megahertz in 5, add 40 megahertz in 6, that's about 2x. And we say nearly 2x because the EIRP limitations in 6 gigahertz are slightly more stringent. You have to watch your power spectral density limits. So it's not quite 2x, it's about 195%, not 200%. But then you can also expand into 6 gigahertz utilizing both of the carriers in 6 right away. Meaning, if I'm comfortable with what I'm doing in 5 gigahertz, I just overlay that scenario with a 6 gigahertz radio and go. And then you can move guys over, alleviate any congestion you had in 5, and keep utilizing 6. And then when we get the ability to do wider channels in 6 gigahertz, now you're adding even more capacity. So lots of different ways to utilize the 450V in your network, for sure. At this point, I'll turn over the mic to Bruce, and he's going to talk about the 4000 series ePMP, which we're also really excited about.
All right, great. Thanks, Matt. And let's go ahead and jump into it. So as Matt said, I'm going to cover the ePMP platform, which is moving to its 4th generation. So for those of you that are not familiar with ePMP, it is used quite extensively in both point-to-multipoint and point-to-point access networks. And we're taking a big step up in performance as we move to the 4th generation. But keep in mind that all of these products in the ePMP platform have always had TDD synchronization, so you can scale them up and have a lot of interference tolerance and scalability. And then if you look at some of the lower cost competitors out there, we do provide that direct support from folks at DoubleRadius, as well as our own support team. And then all of these come with a 3-year hardware warranty. So with all that being said, about 3 million ePMP radios are out there in the wild. So go ahead, Matt. So we are introducing and have introduced 2 platforms. The 5 gigahertz is the 4500 series. That is a 8x8 multi-user MIMO access point, and it does up to 3 gigabits per sector. And the news there is it covers that 1024 QAM modulation, so it gives you that higher modulations as well as 80 meg channels. Now, separately, we have the 4600 and 6 gigahertz. So it is a separate access point that covers 6 gigahertz, and the other one covers 5 gigahertz. In 6 gigahertz, we can do up to 4 gig in a sector. It covers that full 6 gigahertz band. So again, some of the competition stops at 6.4, but both the PMP platforms that Matt talked about, as well as ePMP, will cover that full 6 gigahertz band. So that's something important to keep in mind. And with 6 gigahertz, we'll get into this in more detail, but it's a 4x4 multi-user MIMO. The news there is that it goes all the way up to 4096 QAM with the high performance SM, and it does up to 160 meg channels. So that's how you're achieving that 4 gigabits per second. So go ahead, Matt. So for those of you that are familiar with ePMP, what's the same is over there on the right. So it is the same air interface. So we've got all the features built in around scalable TDD sync and air fairness. So you don't have one poor performing subscriber module that's sort of consuming more than its fair share of bandwidth or air time. Supports both PTP and PMP. Supports all those tools that we'll talk about here in a little bit, Maestro, Link Planner, and CN Heat. And you'll get the same look and feel. So when you open up a radio and you go to configure it, it's going to look very similar. You're just going to see higher speeds, higher modulations, and wider channel bandwidths. But otherwise, it's all the same things that you've grown to know and love on ePMP. What's new is that we talked about the higher capacity. We talked about getting a gigabit per second per subscriber module. Matt talked about 850 megahertz of new spectrum that requires that AFC. There's also some new technologies that we're just on the beginning of the curve of really taking advantage of some of these things like OFDMA, uplink MU-MIMO, in addition to downlink MU-MIMO, which uplink MU-MIMO is really nice for as the industry has shifted to more uplink capacity required with everybody working from home and school from home, and all those different types of applications are starting to drive up the need on uplink. So uplink MU-MIMO is a nice feature. I'll talk a little bit more about SmartQoS on a later slide, and then we talked about the performance improvements. So how's it working in the field? So 4600 series, again, 6 gigahertz we started doing beta tests on this back in October of 22. So almost about a year ago. So these products have been well shaken out in the field. We have about 70 customers that are operating 6 gigahertz under FCC experimental licenses. So significant amount of airtime on these radios over the last year. And so we're really just anxiously awaiting the FCC's final approval, which we are expecting again around the end of the year. What you see here is a couple examples of achieving more than a gig to an end user. This is a half a mile, a 0.4 miles, and 0.57 miles. You can kind of see what those capacities bring. This is using the 4x4 access point as well as the Force 600C subscriber module. And then if we look a little bit further out, if we pull the scope back a little bit, we can see that out at about 1.5 miles, they're still achieving 1.2 gig, and at 2 miles, still 930 meg. So you can draw those similar type of radiuses around these access points and get 2 to maybe 4 miles with these products and still get great capacity and performance. And then we have some customers that are stretching it a little bit further, but think in terms of what you've experienced in the past as far as designing a multi-point network. Go ahead, Matt. And here's another one. This is just an example that came off of that WISP Talk forum. This is a customer that's using it in near line of sight, and in fact, this case is largely non-line of sight. And they were still able to make a connection where they couldn't with previous technologies. So the combination of the beam steering and the OFDMA and the just the general upgrade in performance that you get out of this latest generation. They're able to close links with 5 gigahertz. So don't discount. We talk a lot about 6 gigahertz, but don't discount the significant capacity enhancement that you can get with 5 gigahertz. And it's not just capacity overall, but individual links will operate at higher modulations. So something else to consider. Go ahead. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but I'll show you just where the portfolio is. And you know, the 5 gigahertz 4500 is available today. This has, and on the left-hand side, you'll see 2 products that have been available for a little more than 2 years now, the Force 400C and the Force 425 as point-to-point products. So these are really, really good point-to-point products that deliver more than a gigabit per second. The results coming back from the field just continue to be positive on this as a great sub-6 point-to-point solution. Now, as we move to point-to-multi-point, you'll see on the chart 2 access points. You've got the ePMP 4500. This is it has an integrated 8x8 MU-MIMO antenna, so it's integrated and attached at the factory on the access point. And then you have the 4500L, which is kind of its little brother, which is the 2x2 MIMO. So if you're familiar with 3000 series, this is like the 3000L. It's a 2x2, very low cost, great for small cells or little subdivisions that you're wanting to provide that coverage. So it's really an economical approach. You'll see a reference there to 4500C. That's coming later this year. That's going to be a connectorized 8x8 access point. So more to come on that, but we're seeing some very interesting applications come out of the trials on that one. For access point or for subscriber modules, in North America, there's really one choice, so it's easy. It's the Force 4525, and that you can see has that integrated 25 dBi dish and is the subscriber module in a multi-point network. We will have some additional subscriber modules to come next year, but what we have launched with and what are available today is the 4500 access point, the 4500L access point, and the 4525 SM. Let's look at the 6 gig portfolio. So on 6 gigahertz, it's a little simpler. We have, again, 2 access points, the 4600. That is a 4x4 access point. And then again, its little brother, the 4600L, which is a 2x2. So again, great for small cells. And then on the subscriber module side, there's actually 2 to choose from. There's the 4600C, which is the high performance subscriber module. The thing to keep in mind about this one is that it does, it would require an external dish, which we do sell as an accessory. So you can get that external dish with the 4600C. You also get with the 4600C that 4096 QAM or 4K QAM. You get the SFP port, and you get but it also covers all of the bandwidths and everything. So really, that's the highest performance SM. It's also great for point-to-point solutions. A little bit more cost-effective is the 4625, which we think will be the bread and butter for residential access. But you'll get with that one, it's limited to 1K QAM, so it doesn't go all the way to 4K QAM. But if you don't need that for delivering multiple gigabits per second, it's more cost-effective. The other thing I would highlight is that when you deploy 4625 in the US or Canada, you're going to need to buy that GPS receiver separately. So while the 4600C and the APs have GPS receivers built in, the 4625 requires the Cambium GPS receiver to be deployed with it. And that's a requirement of the FCC. And that's a requirement that was kind of just recently ratified by the FCC or validated, that they will require not only a GPS receiver at every SM, but they'll require the GPS receiver that was certified by the manufacturer at the time of certification of the radio. So it'll have to be the Cambium one, and it'll have to be there every time. So that's just something to keep an eye on. Go ahead, Matt. So I did also want to shout out about the 3000. So the ePMP 3000 is not going anywhere. We have obviously a huge installed base of ePMP 3000, and we also continue to enhance the software on that platform. So as you look at different deployment scenarios, you may consider that the 3000 is a good solution as well. We just recently released 4.7 that added a number of things like the flexible frame support, which allows for very dynamic changes in the capacity of the network. It added this SmartQoS feature, which I'll talk about, I think, on the next slide. So go ahead to the next slide. So SmartQoS is a feature built into the access point. This is available on both the ePMP 3000 as well as on the 4500 and 4600. And what this does is it does a deep packet inspection on the packets and determines what type of application they are. And then you get two benefits out of that. One is I can get a little pie chart like on the right that says of all of the traffic flowing through this access point, what is the application type and how is it distributed? And then further, I can take individual applications or groups of applications. So I can say, for example, all live streaming, I want to put in the high priority queue. All voice, I want to put in, of course, the voice queue. But then I can put things like file transfers in the low priority. So I can start to group not just based on VLAN tags or code points, but I can actually do that based on the actual application. And also just, this would be for people who are really into ePMP and deploying it already, but keep in mind that there are two firmware loads. There's a 4.7, which I mentioned, which is on the ePMP 3000, and that will continue as a 4.x. And then on the ePMP 4000 series, we have the 5.x, and that will continue on its own. I anticipate that the official release for AFC will come out right around the end of the year, coincident with the FCC giving full approval on that band. And then at some point, probably in 2024, we will merge these two load lines so that you'll have one software load, whether I'm working on a 3000 or a 4000. So again, we see a good long life of 3000 living alongside the 4000. So go ahead, Matt. So that is kind of the summary of ePMP. I'm going to just close with a few topics around the supporting software that can be deployed with these networks. And these are really equally applicable to the PMP 450 network as well as with ePMP. First one I'll mention is QoE, or quality of experience. This is a software solution that Cambium brought to market about a year and a half ago. And it has become quite popular, and we're seeing more and more WISPs adopt this. Go to the next one, Matt. I think it's probably easier to talk about it in this context. Really what QoE is, like I said, it's a software solution. And what it does is it sits in line with your traffic that's heading out to the access network and then your peering point back to the internet. And it will act to accelerate that TCP traffic by rapidly sending ACKs back to the network without waiting for it to cross the wireless side. It can support all of your traffic shaping and service levels. So you can tie this in with your subscriber management solution or your billing management tool, and you can apply really fine detailed rate plans. And then that deep packet inspection that's available here can really start to address some of the other issues, like at what point am I reaching congestion in the network such that my latency is going to go up? So at what point in the evening that streamers are watching shows and at the same time people in that household are playing games, where am I going to start seeing that latency increase such that I'm going to get that support call? And by backing down the capacity delivered to that home, I can make sure that latency stays high as well. So that's just an example. And the nice thing is all of this is very easy to deploy. You just basically put it in your network and turn it on. There's not a lot of configuration required or needed. And you'll see on the right-hand side, the real ultimate goal here is to reduce churn, reduce the number of customer calls, and then also we're seeing that this allows operators to defer additional capital expenditure. So they can start by putting in QoE, and it can maybe kick the can down the road a little ways to say, I don't need to upgrade that backhaul for another 90 days or 6 months or later. So the other thing to highlight on QoE is that it's equally applicable to ePMP and PMP 450, but also it's applicable to our fiber solutions, Cambium Fiber. We've seen people deploy this with Wi-Fi only solutions. And then also quite interesting is that people that are new to Cambium, maybe they've got a Ubiquity network deployed out there or a Mimosa network deployed out there. This can be popped into the network and it delivers that performance gain and benefit there as well, while they consider what to do with their network going forward as far as the strategy. Go ahead, Matt. CN Maestro, I think we talked about that, or Matt mentioned it up front, but CN Maestro is, again, the single pane of glass that supports all of the products, whether we're talking about multi-point, point-to-point, the CN Matrix switches, Wi-Fi. It all shows up on one interface, and you get a geographical map, you get a green, yellow, red status indication. You can push firmware updates, configuration. So you get a nice single point of view, single view, and then it also has APIs that you can connect this back into your billing systems and everything else. So really a comprehensive network management solution from Cambium. Go ahead. So we'll talk about planning a little bit. So things have moved along pretty quickly here with Cambium planning. If you've been with Cambium for quite a while, I'm sure you will have come across Link Planner. Link Planner has been sort of the go-to and really the best prediction of performance, whether I want to talk about how much capacity I'm going to get, how much range I'm going to get, and how much availability I'm going to get on a particular link. So the big news here is that over the last, I guess, 6 to 12 months, we've moved this to the cloud. So now where it used to run as a application on your laptop, Windows environment or Apple environment, this now runs in the cloud. So you can open it up, sorry, you can open this up in a browser. And almost everything is moved over to the cloud version now. There might be a few odds and ends on licensed microwave that haven't moved yet, but for the vast majority, you can get access to this in the cloud. And where that's going is that we see a integration of Link Planner with CN Maestro, which of course also operates in the cloud. And what we anticipate going forward is that you'll be able to compare your actual deployed results of the network to what you planned it in Link Planner and highlight the differences. So that's just a real simple example, but it's nice to be able to have your plan and your actual in the same interface. So that's where we see Link Planner going. So more to come on that. And then CN Heat, similarly, this is a LiDAR-based solution that shows you real precise line of sight data based on this LiDAR technology. So you can see there on the right, you can see all the way down to individual trees. And this gets back to, I think Matt made the comment about how do I make sure I have one truck roll installs and I don't have failed installs or failed pre-qualification. So CN Heat has some great capabilities in that area. I do see a couple questions that have popped in. One is QoE standards based? So it is not based on a particular standard. It does use, of course, it uses all of the TCP/IP standards, but it is a proprietary from a how is it doing the optimization and everything. And then the question about could the 60 gigahertz planning tool be made available, and that's another enhancement that we're expecting to come in Link Planner shortly, is the ability to do what we previously referred to as Advanced Network Planner, and that was used for designing mesh solutions or distributed networks with our 60 gigahertz CN Wave product. That's also going to get pulled into Link Planner. So again, you'll be able to get access to all of these things from a single interface: CN Heat, Link Planner, and ANP. Go ahead, Matt. And that brings us to the end. So I know that was a pretty rapid review of PMP and ePMP. I appreciate the questions that popped in there. If there's any more, now's a great time.
Yeah, happy to take any other questions that you have. How about you, Jeff? You got any questions?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, Jeff must have a question.
Actually, no, I just wanted to chime in real quick on a few more things real quick while we're seeing if any other questions come in. So real quick, for those of you that are sitting here watching all this, Cambium has always released some great products. They've been a big player in the WISP market space. The 4500 and 4600 are available. They're on the shelf. They're shipping today. Obviously, the 4600 is still under experimental license until the FCC releases it. But if you want to do your tests, get your experimental license. We have gear that you can do testing with. The 4500 is readily available on the shelf and shipping. Even bringing up the 3000s are also available. Seeing Heat Link Planner. Guys, I've been using Link Planner for as long as it's been around. I've been selling Cambium and Canopy Networks since 2001. It is hands down one of the best tools possible for designing a point-to-point, point-to-multipoint network. Go in there and play with it. It's free. So go in and just mess around with it. I think you'll be shocked. Just about every one of the licensed links and even unlicensed links that I've put together in there, when we've actually installed them, they've been within a meg or two. So it's spot on. It's really accurate. Seeing Heat is a neat tool that if you haven't used, I highly recommend that also. I've been demonstrating that a lot to our clients lately, and when they see the power of it and how cost effective it is to just go in there and design a system before you spend big bucks, see what you're actually going to get, make sure the math works, make sure this whole thing's supposed to be on ROI. So plan ahead. Do the test, spend a little bit of money, see what you can actually get out of your network, make sure the math works, then go deploy. It's just a smarter way to go. So all these tools are readily available. Contact your rep at DoubleRadius. Contact me. I'm here, Jeff H at DoubleRadius.com. Feel free to reach out to me. But I don't have any other questions that came in. Did you guys see any more?
There's one more that popped in just now. So the question was, how many access points do I need to cover 360 degrees? So I'll speak for ePMP first. Generally, we recommend 4 access points per tower, each with a 90-degree sector. But having said that, we have a lot of customers that use horn antennas to go with narrower sectors, like a 30 or 60-degree sector. So that's possible as well, especially with the L series. So especially if you're looking at just lighting up a subdivision or an area and you want to kind of narrow that sector up to avoid the noise outside of that sector, a horn antenna is a good solution there as well. And Matt, I think it's a similar discussion on 450 as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Normally 90-degree sectors is what's kind of recommended and normally what's deployed, but there are situations where you can use narrower sectors and deploy more dense areas and things like that. In terms of overlay and things, we used to talk about N equals 2 and guard bands and things like that, and you can kind of look into that detail. There's a lot of advice around planning in the community forums on both platforms.
And then I see one more question about, it says right now these are operating in FCC test spectrum. What's the possibility of using licensed? So I'm going to guess at the question here and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're asking about is 6 gigahertz experimental licenses, which are still possible to get in 6 gigahertz. There's a guide on our website that if you want to apply for an experimental license in 6 gigahertz. But once the FCC opens up 6 gig with the AFC, I would guess they're not going to be granting those quite as readily, and that you'll have to use the AFC operation. And there's really no plans for Cambium, or for that matter, I don't know of any other supplier that would try to operate in a licensed mode in 6 gigahertz, with the exception of licensed microwave, which are FDD radios typically, and they kind of operate under a different FCC rules. So I think that's what your question was getting at, but please follow up if there's something else I missed there. All right, good. Sounds like we got it.
Good? Well, unless you guys type any more questions in, Bruce, I really appreciate you being here. Matt, really appreciate you being here. And those of you that's sitting in, listening to us today, we are recording this. It will be available if you need to share it or want to review it or go back through it again. Reach out to your sales rep, ask questions. We're here to help. We're here to be a resource for you. We're not just can you give me a quote? Let us be a resource for you to help you increase your return on investment. Gentlemen, anything to finish with? Are we good?
All good. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next one. All right.
Thank you.